name is DR305, the AI assigned to this vessel. We really appreciate you taking the time to visit us. I will now take you to MR3D Dev. Please follow me. If you stay till the end of the video, there will be cake. Here we are. I lied. Not about the cake. The cake is not a lie. I was never gonna take you to the tutorial. Now get ready to...
We're supposed to take the audience to the tutorial room, not the command center. Anyways, I'll take it from here. Alright, loading tutorial.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. In this video we are going to be taking a look at movie render queue in Unreal Engine 5, which is actually what I used to render that intro that you just saw. And if you like that, please leave me a comment down below letting me know if you did, so I can keep making more. Now we're going to take a look at some of the basics. Then in the later part of the video we're going to be animating, and we're going to animate to some sound, and I'm going to show you other things that I haven't shown in my previous video. So make sure you watch all the way to the end. If you are brand new to movie render queue, what it is just a way to use Unreal as a offline rendering engine. So if you've never done 3D, when it comes to doing those high-end 3D renders like what you saw on Love, Death and Robots, or what you see in some of the cutscenes on your video games sometimes, and the reason why they look so different is because they are pre-rendered. So what you do is you get an offline renderer like let's say Cycles for Blender, or RenderMan, which Pixar uses, or Arnold, which is the most common in 3ds Max and Maya. They will be really accurate, but they will be really slow and they are not real time. That means that you hit a button and you let it render and it will create the image for you, and that is it. It's not real time like this. This is real time where I can move and I can still see everything. In those offline renderers, you have to wait for the image to come up. Now, the reason why you want to do that is because you can crank up absolutely everything. You can crank up reflections, resolutions. You can render in 16K, which I have in a separate video. If you want to do ridiculous resolutions for print or for even a bigger screen, all that you can do with Movie Render Queue. That's why it's so useful. So if you go to this clapper, you're going to get some render movie settings, which is fine. And I know this kind of has changed in 4.27, but we're on Unreal Engine 5 early access here. So what you're going to do is you're going to go into Windows Cinematics and you're going to go to Movie Render Queue. This used to be a plugin that you had to turn on. So you usually had to go to Settings, Plugins, and look for Movie Render Queue, and you just had to turn on. In Unreal Engine 5 is turned on by default, so you should not be doing that, but if you have to, now you know. So what we go is into Windows, Cinematics, Movie Render Queue, and you're gonna get this window right here. So in this windows, you are going to add your sequence. So you can see there's a bunch of sequences here, some trial and error that I did for the scenes that you saw in the beginning. And you're going to select your sequence. If you've never used Sequencer before, is this little nifty tool that allows us to create video and to also animate objects within the scene. As you can see, I can open and close doors, but we're going to take a look at that in a little bit. Now, going back to Movie Render Queue. What you do here usually is you click render and you look for your sequence once you've created it. So let's take this sequence right here, which we already have. It's this one. And you're going to see that you have a job, and with the cameras, camera or cameras, depending on how many you have here, you're going to see you have settings. I have unsafe configuration because I have not set anything yet, and you have where the output's going to go. Now, what I do is if I click here, I already have a preset, so you can also go to presets. That's why this is so useful. And you can just select your preset and it's already there. It's already set up for you. And you don't have to do it all over again, but we're going to look at how to do in presets first. I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to go back here. And this is your default. So usually gives you a JPEG sequence, which if you are rendering and are going to do any kind of post-processing later in a program like DaVinci Resolve or After Effects or Premiere Pro, whatever, if you're using Movie Render Queue, I recommend you do. You probably do not want to use JPEG because that's the most compressed file. You're probably going to want to use something else. And you can go here into settings and you can add another type of file. Now we have ProRes now, which is one of the best looking type of files you can get. However, this is a video file. I like to work with image sequences. So when I'm doing things, I usually go with either a PNG or EXR. If I'm testing things, I usually go with PNG. If I'm finalizing, I go with EXR. EXR are very, very heavy files. This is why I leave it all the way to the end when I'm 100% sure that this is what I'm going to do. So for this, I'm just going to select EXR. I usually leave it at PIZ. Multilayer, I always leave this by default. That being said, remember to turn off the ones you're not using. Then I usually go into output, and over here is where you're going to find the main things that you're going to be using for your animation, meaning your output directory, where your animation is going to go, where all your files are going to be there. File format, how you want the naming format of your files to be. I usually leave this as default because it doesn't bother me. You have the output resolution. You could select 4K. However, depending on the kind of software, the kind of hardware you have, this might be detrimental to doing it here. So if you want to do 4K, usually if I'm going to go 4K, I do something that's called high resolution, which we're going to see in a second. But if I'm doing something for YouTube, the usual 1080p will do. Now, use custom frame rate, I'm going to turn on because I'm doing 30 frames per second. But if you're doing film, usually you'll be doing 24 frames per second. So you can leave it as it is, but I like to change it to 30 just to match the rest of my video. Override existing output. This would mean that anytime you hit render, it's going to override what it has. For me, I always leave it on because I don't want like a gajillion files to be generated all the time, and it can be confusing, so I always leave this on. This actually doesn't affect your render. This is how many digits your naming convention is going to have. This is very useful when you're doing images sequences. And this is if you wanted to render that extra frames, because there's always an extra frame that renders in the beginning. I leave it at 0 because I always delete frame 0. The first frame, it always looks like garbage for some reason. I still don't know why, but I always eliminate frame 0 and start from frame 1 on. Over here, I usually don't touch this unless I'm doing some tests. So I like to run things from start to finish, and once we get into the sequence, we're gonna look at that. But for now, know that if you're doing some testing, like I'm usually do, like let's say I want to test from this part of the animation to this part of the animation, then I would turn this on and we'll tell it, okay, render from this frame to this frame. So I don't have to do the whole thing every time I'm testing something. Versioning, I never touch that. It never affects my render. All right, so those are the most basic things you're gonna need for Movie Render Queue. Right out of the box, you can render as it is right now. That being said, I always like to add extra stuff. For instance, the most important other thing that I like to add is anti-aliasing. So if I click this one, you're gonna see that we have some anti-aliasing here. We have the spatial and we have the temporal sample. This is the one I use because this is the one that was recommended since 4.26 when Movie Render Queue came out. So I usually like to leave this. If it's not something super high-end, I usually leave it at 12 so it doesn't take that long. If it's something that I want to render at really high quality, like the pitch that I just did for Epic, I usually go with 32 or 64. That's going to take way longer, but it's going to look a lot better. So let's do 12 just for this. And when you do 12, you're going to see that you get this warning. If the product of temporal and spatial count is greater than the number of TAA, then TAA is ineffective. So you want to override the anti-aliasing so it doesn't use the anti-aliasing that's in the engine. It's actually going to use the one that's right here. Everything else I leave as default except for these numbers. Render warm-up count. You are going to need some warm-up if you are using any kind of effects. However, I personally, even though I'm not using any sort of VFX generated here, I like to leave it at least at 12 at minimum. I usually crank this a little bit higher to like 24 or 30 if I'm doing higher renders. I do this just to be on the safe side. You could render out of this and you're gonna get a really high quality render just with all these settings that I just showed you. Now, like I said, if you were gonna do 4K or higher than 4K, I highly recommend you use this high resolution feature. And in here, you're going to tell it how many tiles you're gonna do. So what this does is every time it renders a frame, instead of rendering the whole frame like it's usually doing, it's gonna render it by tiles. That way, if you're doing 8K, it's not gonna run out of memory. It has run out of memory even with a 3090, which I have. So if you're doing 4K or something higher, highly recommended. Tile count, I usually go by 2 or 4. Overlapping ratio is how much the tiles are going to overlap to each other. So you can increase this to by 0.1 just to be on the safe side. But again, I'm not going to use this right now because I'm not going to do 4K. Now, when you go here, you're going to see that you get this. This will render 4 tiles, each with an individual resolution of this. There will be a total of 4 renders per tick. That means that your render times are going to be much longer, and there are some effects that this feature does not support. So remember to take those things into account if you're going to be using this feature. Now, there is one more thing that I actually added to my preset, and this is something that I learned from JS Films. The link to his video is going to be in the description down below. And he did a video on how to render log out of Unreal Engine. Render log is something that you would want to use if you want to have a high color range that you can use later on in your post-processing effect program, like again, DaVinci, After Effects, or whatever. Go to his video. It's really cool. All you have to do is add the color output and just disable tone curve. He goes much more in depth into how to do this, so make sure you visit that one. Okay, so once I'm done, what I would do is go to preset and save preset as, and you get it and you give it a name. The beauty of making a preset is you can transfer this preset to other projects, so that way you don't have to be making presets all over again every single time. That being said, every project is different, and I do make a preset per project, but I don't have to make it per level or per sequence. All projects are different. I personally create a preset per project just because of depending on what I want to have. Now, I know I just showed you this thing about color output, and you're going to say, but well, you have a post-processing effect volume where you can actually change the coloring inside Unreal. Yes, and that post-processing is great if you want to do some in-game features. However, if you want to render cinematics, it's best that you use a third-party program like After Effects or DaVinci Resolve. DaVinci Resolve is actually free, so you can just get that and do your coloring there. Now, I already have a preset saved, so I'm just going to load my preset. And I have all my things around here, and all I do is hit render local, and that's going to start rendering. But if I render right now, this thing is just going to crash. That is Movie Render Queue. If you have seen my previous video on Movie Render Queue, you're probably thinking that I forgot something here, which is the console variables. All those console variables that I used last time are for using ray tracing, which we're not. We're using Lumen. I still have to find out which are the variables for that, and I'll make a video on that, probably a Revit tutorial on what those variables are so you can use it. But as of right now, I'm actually not using any variables. So let's get to the meat and potatoes of this video, which is sequencer and how to do some animations in there. I already have the first part of the animation right here. So as you can see, this is like the intro that you saw there. Drone will take you over here and doors open. So as you can see, you can add any object that you want to the sequencer. So what I did is I click on my door, and if I click on my door, it's going to recognize that it's already here. So once you do that, then you have, let's say over here, and let's say I wanted to move, and remember, always leave this key on, and it will make your life much easier, because when you move stuff, then it will stay keyed, so you don't have to press the key all the time. So let's say I leave it up to here, so that's going to be where it's going to stay. As you can see, the camera cut is really important, because once you put it in, you need to make sure that your camera cut encompasses your whole rendering portion. So let's say if I'm rendering from 0 to frame 1600, then your camera cut has to go all the way to that. Sometimes when you add your camera cut and you expand your region, the camera cut will not follow, so you just have to extend it manually by clicking here, the edge, and dragging it to where you wanted it to end. So make sure you do that, because otherwise, like if I were to do this and I wanted to render all the way to the end, this part's not gonna render anything else. So make sure you always render, make sure you always do your camera cut all the way to the end. Now, a couple of things that I do to make my life easier is to go to perspective and make sure I'm in cinematic viewport whenever I'm using sequencer. The reason for that is I can use these numbers to play with everything that I have here. So let's say I want this animation to go to 2250 frames. So all I have to do is type it here. And this thing expands, and all I have to do is move my camera cut all over there. So if I want to go back, I do it like this, because doing it like this can be a pain. So that's why I just like to use that number. This number right here, it's going to look at where your timeline is going to end. So if I want my timeline to end at the same point of my red flag, which is the end of my animation, I would type 1600 over here, and there you go. My timeline instantly adjusts to that. So I'm just going to do 2600 and leave it where it was. And I got my timeline all the way over here. I like to give myself a little bit of a buffer, or a little bit of a space. That'll be a better word for that. Just to make sure that in case I need the space, I can just drag it instead of having to go back and forth. Now, the other thing that I like about this is instead of having to position your cursor around here, you can just type a number. So let's say I want to go to 750. It's going to take me to 750. I want to go to 900. There you go. So you don't have to be dragging this thing all over, which can be, again, can be a pain. If I want to eliminate these extra frames that I have right here, I can just type 0, and there you go. It trims my composition here in sequencer. Another thing that I want to show you that I used to make, this is a mistake that I used to make, is I used to animate. This is what I would call animating from a bird's eye view. So you can see right here that the keys are very, very close together. They're actually not. They're quite separated. There's quite a bit of spacing in between them, but I'm just seeing a zoomed out version of it. So if you want to zoomed in, and if you use any of the post-processing third-party programs that I mentioned before, like After Effects, Premiere, whatever, they work the same way. So all you have to do is move this key, and you will pretty much zoom in. As you can see, my keys are separating. And this is where I like to work. So once I narrow a group of frames that I want to work at, I like to zoom in as close as I can, because that way it's easy to grab and drag and drop them. Or in case I need to move a key, it's going to be a lot easier. So that's one of the things, a mistake that I used to make when I first started using sequencer. Now, another thing that I want to mention here is if you want a character to use already pre-established animation and you want to animate it here in sequencer as well, you can do both things. So as you can see, I have this robot animated, and it moves along. But he does have some animations that he comes with. By the way, all the assets that I have here, I purchased on the marketplace. There's going to be a link to them down below. If you go and purchase those, make sure you let them know that I sent you there. So maybe they'll send me some assets and I can review more stuff for you guys later. So what you'll do is, for instance, this robot has some animations. So let's go to where he is. So here he is. And this is this little skeleton, very self-explanatory. It's telling me that this is a skeletal mesh. And as you can see, this brick is pretty much a static mesh. So over here we have animations, and if we click this animation, you can see these are all the animations this little drone has. So I'm gonna pick idle flying because I want to add that on top of the animations that I already did. So I'm just gonna click here, and this is going to make a new track for me. So the beauty of this is that I can just take it all the way to the beginning, zoom out, and I can drag by the edge. And if you have a loopable animation like this one, this animation loops perfectly. I can drag it all the way to the end without any worries. So if we go into our camera, and as you can see, this drone is, hey, oh, there you are. So it has this little animations on the side, and it's kind of floating. I bumped floating a little bit, so it moves a little bit more. But I like these two things moving around, which really adds to the little character that this guy is. So as you can see, everything is working fine. Your movement that I just did here in Sequencer with the animation that I already have on him. Now let's go to another part that I want to show you, which is animating with audio. So for this particular animation, what I did is I recorded a little bit of audio. I did some post-processing on that to make it sound like a robot. And then I just exported it out as WAV. So that way I can just bring it here in Unreal. So I'm just gonna go and grab this here and drop it into my content folder. The reason why I did that is because I want to do drag and drop. You can import your assets if you wanted to. I just like to do this. And there you go, we have an audio track. So if we play,
Here we are.
you can actually listen to it.
About the cake. The cake is not a lie.
And another thing that you can do is you can actually drag things so they are reorganized. And I want to bring this up so I can see what's going on here. And I'm going to bring this sound all the way to my last frame. So zoom in, make sure I'm on my last frame. So every time you click on a frame, your cursor from here is going to go back to where it was. And I'm just going to take this all the way to here. And as you can see, your robot's kind of looking for me, and then
Here we are. I lied. Not about the cake. The cake is not a lie.
and I wanted to animate a little bit more than just staying here floating. So because these are too close together, actually I can trim. Actually, I'm going to trim, and I'm going to get closer. I'm going to click here, hold Alt, and you can duplicate. And I can extend it and do a little bit more trimming. I want a little bit more separation between the speech. So that's what I'm going to do here. So let's see how that works.
Here we are. I lied.
Okay. I think I could separate this a little bit further. This says not about the cake. The cake is not a lie.
Not about the cake. The cake is not a lie.
By the way, I hope you got that reference. If you didn't, that means I'm just really, really old. So I'm gonna put this around here. Let's see how it sounds.
Here we are. I lied. Not about the cake.
Probably gonna get it closer.
I lied. Not about the cake.
Okay, now what I'm gonna do is we have the rotation over here. I'm actually going to, let's say, grab this. I'm gonna put it here. There you go. The reason why I'm doing this, and this is one of the things about animating in 3D, if I leave this key here and I start change his head to one side, then his head will be turning from here all the way down to whatever I put the other key for the head turning. That being said, I don't want a long motion that takes a lot of time to get from one place to the other because there are many frames between here and here. I want it to be like a short no-no. So I'm just going to go like this and then do 1 and zoom in more. 2, and then we're going to get this. We're just going to repeat it here. Oh, that's too fast. That's ridiculous. So let's just create a separation there. And it needs to go back to its initial position where it's actually looking at you. So there you go. And I made a mistake. I need to hold Alt in order to duplicate this key. And I think this is probably a little bit too harsh still. So I'm just going to separate the keys. Couple frames. Okay. It's jumping too far. Like that. Okay, let's see. There's a little bit more movement that you saw there in the intro. I'm gonna add later.
The cake is not allowed.
Probably make it a little bit more subtle. And by the way, I deactivated the snapping because otherwise this would be a nightmare.
Not about the cake. The cake is...
Okay, it's a little bit of overdrive there.
The cake is not allowed.
There you go. I want him to be a little bit distrustful here. I want him to look at the floor. By the way, this is a clue, you know, when someone's lying and when they're talking to you, they look somewhere else, they look at the floor. And let's see. Let's just, there you go. That's how it looks.
Not about the cake. The cake is not a lie.
Let's make this. Okay, I'm just going to lower this a little bit. Before I do that, I think I should mark the position over here because I want him to keep this position. So I'm just going to mark everything here. And that way when I move him down like this, then there you go.
Not about the cake. The cake is not...
He looks down. He looks down. And he looks a little bit up in here. And he goes back to its regular position. Okay, I think I'm gonna make this a couple frames like that.
Not about the cake. The cake is not a lie. Not about the cake. The cake is not a lie.
Okay, so you're saying that because I changed some keys here, I need to change these keys as well. So the best and easiest thing to do is just get rid of those keys. There you go. Now he's still moving because of this animation, but I no longer have that thing where he kind of was moving backwards. So
not about the cake. The cake is.
let's make this not as jarring. There you go. He returns to his position, and then it kind of looks down and looks a little bit towards the left. And maybe we can just drag another one of these like around here.
About the cake. The cake is not a lie.
Okay, let's see its next part. Okay, let's finalize this little piece. And this is where I interrupt the conversation.
Not a lie. I was never gonna take you to the tutorial. Now get. Not about the cake. The cake is not a lie. I was never gonna take you to the tutorial. Now get ready to.
And he's gonna look up at this very second when I interrupt. So I'm gonna drag another key, and this is going to be very sudden. So I'm gonna show you another thing. Another thing about this is.
Get ready to.
Okay, this is the 2, so it's a little bit before. And probably is it too close? Maybe make it here, and over here we're gonna do the other frames where he's gonna go like this and over here. And as you can see, it kind of moves, so I better do a transformation lock. So transformation lock goes like this. Boom. Everything is transformed now to this exact position. And that way, when I make a change over here, and he goes this way and this way, looking for me, I'm probably on a speaker right here.
Ready to.
And I think I need to move this actually this way. Over here. See?
Ready to.
Okay, get scared. And that's me talking and telling her to load the tutorial. Alright, so I already recorded myself, and the time from where I appear here, where my voice starts, actually takes about 12 seconds. So what I do is I do 12 seconds times 30, which is 360 frames. So from here, when she actually responds to me, I want to add 360 frames. So over here, it'll be 1454 plus 360. It'll be 1814, and I want her to react to me. So all the way up to, let's say, around, we can type it here. There you go. And I want to take her animation all the way to the end. And she's listening to me for a little bit. Then she looks down. Actually, I want to get this over here. And she looks down, kind of like, oh, what did I do? I didn't do a good job. This is not cool. And I'm just going to drag this one. And see, now she's feeling bad and she's just floating in there. And then she, over here, all the way to the end, she just turns. Still looking down. And then she leaves. So all the way over here, I'm going to do this, this, and she's gone. All right, let's see how that looks.
Now get ready to.
Okay, so she didn't like that. So now she didn't do right. So now she's slowly going out of the frame. There you go. And that's how I did the intro of this animation. All right, so another thing that I want to show you guys is the curves. And I guess this video is already too long, but it's something really important. So let's look at rotation, and here are the curves. And as you can see, some of them have these little triangles. That means they are linear, and this little kind of like diamonds, that means that they have this nice Bezier handles that we can move. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna focus in the part where she goes nuts and looks up. So as you can see, only the X and the Z are being affected. So I'm just gonna scroll, and you can right click and move, scroll to zoom in. And I want these to be linear. So right click on them after selecting them, and let's see how she moves now.
Now get ready to.
Okay, a little bit better. The problem with these is there is an ease in and ease out. So the linear takes care of that. I'm actually gonna go into the X part. And we're gonna do the same thing. Probably gonna do the same thing on all of them. Just turn them into linear. And let's see how that behaves.
Now get ready to.
There you go. So when the part where she feels bad, that's fine, where she is doing it, you know, like that. Alright everybody, that is it for this video. It was a little bit longer than usual, but I wanted to cover absolutely everything else there is to cover from the basics of Movie Render Queue. If there is something that you're finding difficult that you want me to cover, please let me know in the comments or go to our Discord. You can tag me there. If you have a request for a tutorial, I'm more than happy to oblige if I see a lot of people are struggling with something, especially with Sequencer of Movie Render Queue, which is something that I've been using a lot. So thank you very much for watching. Remember, there's the Patreon, there's the Twitter, the Discord that I just mentioned, so you can join our beautiful community. And I'll see you in the next video.